Black individuals and groups. It's going to be absolutely amazing. And guess what? We even have a special guest speaker lined up to tell us about the most scientific moment in the American Civil Rights Movement. We are so glad you are here with us today. Now, I'm going to pass it to Avery.
We would like to recognize a very special guest in attendance with us today. Sitting with the principal, Mr. Taylor, please welcome Dr. William Maxwell. Dr. Maxwell holds both a master's and a doctorate from Harvard University. He is 94 years young. What a way to continue the legacy of Black excellence. Thank you for joining us. Known as the African American national anthem, Lift Every Voice and Sing was written by James Weldon Johnson and composed by his brother, J. Rosen Johnson, in 1900. The hymn is a call to arms for unity and resilience among African Americans of all ages and backgrounds. With the goal to capture the pain and hope of a generation in its words and music, the song has deeply resonated with the African American community for over a century. With that, please welcome to the floor your Arkansas High Choir as they perform Lift Every Voice and
president. Today, let's take a journey back in time with the iconic Bantu knot. This isn't just your hairstyle, it's a symbol of strength and resilience. We're going to learn that these knots are trying to create a cultural identity. So when you see these knots, remember the courage and the story woven into each twist and turn. Let's celebrate the power and history of Bantu knots. Our hairstyle, let's speak volume.
Now let's get into some original fashion. The dashiki is a traditional market.
Spirit of freedom and rebellion. Although not invented by a single person, the style was created by the era of cultural changes, including African American culture music and dance. Black music inspired the scene and brought people together over a peace project. The Flapper Jazz and Jazz are both legacies of that transformative time.
High top shoes or Jordans are a symbol of cultural pride and identity. High top often features popular fashion. Wearing high top shoes. Rock those shades. Don't be afraid to put your pride on.
So when you rock those two, you're not just wearing earrings, you're carrying a responsibility.
Just like Byron and Bowie, it's all about grace. Black women was always able to embrace the culture and art while playing with these bold like that.
our guest speaker for today. The Little Rock Nine may be a familiar name to some of you. The 9 African American students that attended Little Rock Central High School broke a boundary that had yet to be broken in the mid-1900s. This act of courage helped pave the way for racial integration in schools and symbolized the fight for equal rights and opportunities for all. As we listen to the story of the students and the details of the significant milestone for African Americans, please listen with respect. So please, if you will, help me join in welcoming the Rebecca Hoffman, Park Guide with the National Park Service and official on the Little Rock Nine.
To middle school first and then spend some time with you this afternoon. I can't tell you the whole story as much as I would like to, but I'm going to tell you what I think is some of the most important details about the story and why it is so special to me. This story is so special to me, y'all, that I moved from Virginia 4 years ago so that I could work in Little Rock and tell this story. I do it because I love history and because I'm very passionate about this topic, and not to sound totally corny, but I want to be the change that we want to see in the world, right? And I think the best way I can do that is by telling this story. So I'll be jumping around a little bit, and I know that y'all are old enough to know a lot of these details already, but of course by the time that the Little Rock Nine came along, there had already been years and years of legalized segregation in the form of all facilities, right? Schools, movie theaters, and this had gone back to the Plessy versus Ferguson decision of 1896 that said segregation was fine so long as the facilities were equal, which is really not how any of that works. And 30 years after the Plessy decision is when Little Rock Central High School was built in 1927. Hopefully y'all can see these pictures, but I like to show a comparison between the white high school of Little Rock and what would have been the black high school of Little Rock. Central High School cost $1.5 million in 1927 to build. It is about $17 million in today's money. It is 2 city blocks wide. It is built for a capacity of 3,000 students at the time. It's never been at capacity. When it opened its doors, it was 10th through 12th grade and 2 years of junior college or community college. And it had about 1,800 students. That's a lot of unused empty space, right? So why is it so big if a population like that did not exist? Why spend so much money? They called it the most beautiful high school in America at the time, but at what cost? And that cost was the sacrifice of black education. Because the thing is when the time came along for the black community of Little Rock to need a new school, the state says, we already spent all the money in Central. There's no money left over. We didn't know you wanted a new school, never mind the fact that the black community had had a fire at their school, and so they were having to send their children to a building with smoke damage. And then they see this beautiful facility being built, and then they're told there's no money left over. So what does the black community of Little Rock do? They are going to fundraise, they're going to apply for grants, and they build Dunbar, which is a middle school, a high school, and a junior college. Now they do get a little bit of money from the state. They get some money from the Rosenwald Fund, which was a private grant established for building black schools in the South. Rosenwald schools were normally trade schools only, but Dunbar was one of only 2 Rosenwald schools in the state of Arkansas that taught trade and college prep. Because the black parents of Little Rock wanted their children to have all opportunities presented to them. So the rest of the money came from the black community of Little Rock. They had big sales and jump sales and fundraisers. And that to me makes Dunbar so much more beautiful than Central could ever be because of what it represents. The promise of an education that you work hard and you do your best in school. We're all told that all our lives growing up, right? You can be anything. Something that I want to stress to you guys, when Dunbar was being built in 1929, there are still people alive who would have been born enslaved. Who would have been born into a country that said it was illegal for them to get an education. And now they have the opportunity to get an education for their children or themselves or their grandchildren, and they are not going to let anything stop them. That to me makes Dunbar so much more beautiful. And of course, it's a separate but equal school system, right? What does separate but equal look like? In this picture, you can see comparison of the English class between Central and Dunbar. Dunbar's overcrowded. They do not have enough textbooks. Their textbooks are all used hand-me-downs from Central that usually had racial slurs written in them by the time the students at Dunbar got their hands on those textbooks. And you can see in the photo, kids are standing up in the back, and there's just not enough space or resources for them. And the thing is, something that's very important to me, that if I had more time with y'all, I would get even deeper into it, but when we learn and teach our children in this country about Jim Crow laws and about segregation and about the civil rights movement, we always focus on the South. And this has become a problem for me because a lot of times people come from all over the country, from outside of the South, and they think that these stories only happen down here. And they say to me, we just didn't have these problems where I grew up. And I always kind of wonder where in the United States are they wanting me to believe has not been touched by racism. Because the thing is that while we may have been a little bit more in your face about it down here in the South, segregation of facilities happens all over the place in the United States. This one picture I have comparing home economics classes, you see black girls in their home economics class being taught how to be maids. And I have a picture just like this of black girls in school in New Jersey being taught how to be maids. Whereas white girls are being taught how to be wives and mothers. So this is not just a Southern issue, right? So by 1954, the NAACP has slowly been building a case to try to go after segregation in all its forms. And they finally have the opportunity to go before the United States Supreme Court to hear about desegregation of public schools. And the Supreme Court agrees to hear this case. The man on the left, depending on where you're at, in the blue robes, the white man on the screen is Earl Warren, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, a man who was appointed by President Eisenhower, who was often seen as a hero in the story of Little Rock 9, and yet Eisenhower said putting Earl Warren on the Supreme Court was the worst decision he ever made as president. And that's because President Eisenhower did not support integration. He got dragged into the story of Little Rock, kicking and screaming when he didn't have any other choice. In the middle is Kenneth and Mamie Clark, a key component of the Brown case, and Mamie is an Arkansas girl. She was from Hot Springs. They were renowned psychologists who helped to show how segregated society automatically has children feeling inferior, that black children were automatically growing up internalizing feelings of inferiority by living in a segregated society, showing that separate can never be equal as long as children are still automatically describing more positive attributes to light skin or white skin or whatever. And if there is one thing that I have learned in the 4 years that I've been doing this work, and I've started really thinking about this a lot this week, is that every time you hear in a school textbook or on social media or a documentary, people always like to say, oh, someone was the first. They say, Little Rock 9 were the first. Ruby Bridges was the first. They were not the first. They say Rosa Parks was the first. She wasn't the first, right? They say Claudette Colvin. Claudette Colvin wasn't even the first. A lot of times, I think, if you read in a book, someone says someone was the first, check it. Because the thing is that a lot of times these other stories and other firsts in our history, in your state's history, have been forgotten. As soon as, it's changed on one side but not on the other. As soon as July of 1954, the community of Charleston, Arkansas is going to begin to integrate. I don't know what's going on with this screen, just in case anybody needs to do anything. Charleston, Arkansas votes to unanimously integrate. 2 months after the Brown decision. But if somebody can show me a public school textbook right now that says Charleston, I will give you $5. I say that because I know it's not going to happen, because Charleston's never mentioned. Hoxie, Arkansas, one of the teachers over at the middle school, Mrs. Split, I believe her name is, she told me after the presentation, her mother was part of the integration at Hoxie. And Hoxie happened in 1955. Fayetteville, Arkansas, everybody knows Fayetteville, but Fayetteville also began integrating before the Little Rock 9. They began in the fall of 1954, and even had an integrated football team in 1954. So there are a lot of stories that we don't always hear about, and why not? Because by and large, these communities integrated with no violence. So it's not a circus, and that's why you don't hear about it. And yet, this is your state history happening, or has happened. So, what about here, what about in Little Rock? You have Mrs. Daisy Bates, who was going to be the president of the Arkansas State Conference NAACP. Just think about that for a moment, guys. A woman in the 1950s as the president of anything, let alone a major organization like the National Association for the Educated Colored People. How many of y'all know that we have Daisy Bates Day state holiday? That's what I thought. It's a state holiday in Arkansas to celebrate Daisy Bates Day. They didn't give her her own day though, it's on President's Day. But yeah, last year I spoke at an elementary school and the kids were just as confused as you guys were that there is a state holiday called Daisy Bates Day. So it's coming up this month. So Daisy Bates is going to immediately be putting pressure on the Little Rock School District to begin integration. And they kind of blow her off for a while until finally they announced a plan of gradual integration starting in 1957. And they put a lot of restrictions in place. They say if you want to go to Central, you have to have perfect grades, you have to have perfect attendance records. They tell the kids they will not be allowed to participate in any extracurricular activities. So any of y'all who do clubs or sports or anything like that, if you wanted to go to Central, you had to give it up. Ernest Green played the sax, he had to give it up. Carlotta Walls was a track star, she had to give it up. All to go to Central. And by the time we get to the fall of 1957, we went from 200 kids originally who signed up to 10 children. And I also would be happy to give $5 to anybody who can show me a textbook that says there were 10 children on the first day of integration in Little Rock. Spoiler alert, you're not going to find it unless you go and write it yourself. There were 10 children who were supposed to integrate on September 4th, 1957, not 9. And so what happens the night before school is supposed to start? The governor of Arkansas, Orville's office, is going to announce that he has received all these reports of threats being made against the city over the issue of integration. He claims caravans are coming with people who mean to do harm, that every night in the city's been bought up. And so he says he is sending in the Arkansas National Guard to protect the lives and property of the citizens of Little Rock, which is nonsense. The National Guard's responsibility at Central under Faubus's orders will be to not allow any black people to enter Central High School. So he is setting up a direct challenge with federal authority, and spoiler alert, never really works out in history when states think they're going to usurp the federal government, right? The 10 children that are supposed to integrate at Central are told to come to school on September 4th, wait a day and see what happens. And on September 4th, the 10 children were supposed to originally arrive at a pre-designated location and then walk to school with ministers that were going to walk them. However, at the last minute, and then before Daisy Bates had changed the plan, she wanted them all to arrive together rather than arrive separately and try to meet up. Unfortunately, not everybody got that message because one of the students did not have a telephone in her house. And Daisy forgot to go over her house the next morning and tell her in person, which is how we wound up with these photographs. And I apologize that y'all are stuck looking at Governor Faubus. It's not a pleasant sight. Elizabeth Eckford was 15 years old when she showed up to go to Central. She wanted to go to Central because she knew her parents could not afford to send her to college. She really wanted to go to college. She thought Central was her opportunity to be able to do so, to be able to afford it, to get scholarships. And Elizabeth is someone who's very, very special to me. I've gotten to know her over the last few years. She still lives in Little Rock. I'll get to see her tomorrow. And a lot of times when people look at these pictures of Elizabeth and that angry crowd surrounding her, they often talk about how calm and maybe even unbothered she looks. And she's terrified, y'all. And Elizabeth, from this moment on, until to this day, she will suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder because of the events that she went through on September 4th, 1957. People hurling racial slurs at her, telling her to go back to Africa, threatening to kill her, to the point that when she was in college, she tried to take her own life because of how horribly depressed and broken she was from the events that she went through in September of 1957. But she is an incredible woman, and I hope one day you all will get to hear her and see her speak. It's a really, really special opportunity. But she said if she's given the opportunity today to do it all over again, she wouldn't, because of how much of her life she lost because of these events that she went through. an attempt to integrate. This is because her father was being threatened with the loss of his job, and so he sent Jane back to Horace Mann, the new black high school that had been built 2 years previously, in the hopes that he wouldn't be fired. He was fired from his job anyway, and that's when he became Little Rock 9, sometime between the 4th and the 23rd of September. There was such a significant need to the point that a federal injunction had to finally be ordered against Scholars to stand down and to allow integration to proceed. Scholars moved the National Guard by September 23rd, and disposal. There are 100 cops stationed at Central on September 23rd, and by that point there are now over 1,000 people protesting on a regular basis to try to prevent these children from getting inside the school. The 9 had to be smuggled in the school, and it does not take long before just chaos begins to reign supreme. Some of these photos you can see people fighting with the police officers. There's a black reporter named Alex Wilson who's going to be savagely beaten by the crowds. He's hit in the head with a brick at one point, which eventually, 3 years after these events, leads to his death when he has developed Parkinson's disease and died in 1960. No charges were brought against any of the people who assaulted Mr. Wilson. The 9 had to very quickly be evacuated out of the school because at one point a representative from the crowd is sent in to try to negotiate with the chief of police. And this gentleman's idea of negotiating was proposing they be allowed to kill one of the Little Rock 9 so that the other 8 could get out. And all 9 children overheard this conversation. Keep in mind, 1957, because this is only 2 years after the death of Emmett Till. They could very easily become the next Emmett Till, and they know that. Thankfully, that's not what happened. Finally, on September 25th, President Eisenhower is going to send in the 101st Airborne Division in order to enforce integration at Little Rock. And the Little Rock 9 step into the front doors of the school and into the front pages of history, and this is where most textbooks with the story end. And the question then becomes, do you think that just because the military got those 9 kids inside the school, everything was hunky-dory and they all lived happily ever after? No! Because what the textbooks then don't go into is the real story. It's not getting them inside the school, it's surviving the school. Of these 9 children were victims of physical and psychological violence every single day that they went to that school. Bella Patillo had to start wearing glasses and she was sprayed in the face with acid, damaging her eyesight. Carlotta Walls said that she would have to change clothes in the principal's office because kids would spray things on their clothes and ruin their clothing. Gloria Ray would talk about finding urine and fecal matter in her locker. The boys said they hated gym class more than any other class because they were required to take a shower. And the reason why they didn't like taking a shower at school was because when they were in the shower, students would turn all the lights off in the locker room so it became pitch black. Now you can't see anything in front of you. And then they start flushing the toilets. If anybody who grew up in an old house knows, to not flush the toilet if someone's in the shower. They start flushing the toilets and flushing so that the shower water gets hotter and hotter until it is scalded. And if the boys ran out of the shower to escape that burning hot water, there's broken glass waiting for them all along the shower tile floor. It's every single day, y'all, that these kids are putting up with untold horrors of violence, and somehow they find it in themselves to keep going back. Because at some point, while these 9 children did not sign up to change history, they were just kids like y'all are. They just wanted what everybody wants, a good life, a better opportunity. They signed up, and they realized they were changing history. And they were afraid that if they gave up, if word got out into the press how badly they were suffering physically and psychologically, that the whole integration experiment would be a failure. And we can look around today and see the results of those sacrifices. Sacrifices they shouldn't have had to make, but where would we be if Little Rock 9 had not made those sacrifices? And they were just kids, like you guys are. Minnie Jean Brown, who's a very good close friend of mine, She was expelled eventually from Central because she was what they call a troublemaker. Or she tells you she was expelled for being proud and beautiful and confident, and they could not stand to see a proud and beautiful black girl. And so the students tended to go after her more than any of the other 9 at the school. They even said they hated Jean more than any of the other 9 because she walked the halls like she belonged there. And if that's not a spirit to emulate, I don't know what is, because Minnie Jean is a firecracker to this day. She was expelled. She had to leave her home at 16 years old to go to high school someplace else in New York. She was going to live with Kenneth and Mamie Clark for the doll test. And in the final weeks of the school year, it became one down, 8 to go. This is a card that was passed around the halls of Central to try to encourage us to go after someone else. We got one out, who can we get out next? Let's go after Ernest Green. He was the only senior. He was set to graduate. Even teachers got in on it. Some began to give him failing grades. A previously straight A student was suddenly failing in 12th grade. His mother gets his grade 6. Then he receives letters telling him he should go to his graduation. And this was a very important fact, issue of contention for his mother, because she had a PhD from the University of Arkansas. Think about that, a black woman in 1957 had a PhD from the University of Arkansas. But she was not allowed to attend her graduation. And so she was not going to let them keep Ernest from attending his graduation. And then they try to only get him a handful of tickets so he can't invite everybody he'd like to invite. But that's okay, because Ernest Green got to have Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. at his high school graduation. Ernest said he wishes he had the hindsight to not cash the personally handwritten check Dr. King gave him as graduation gift, because how much more it probably would have been worth, just a few years later. But yeah, he graduated. He went to the University of Michigan. He majored in engineering. He today lives in the Washington, D.C. area. And for all of you on TikTok, his daughter Mackenzie has an account on TikTok, so if you want to learn more, go follow her. She's an amazing person. You can learn a lot more about the Green family. I know we're about finishing up, so I'm going to finish up in just a moment. In the fall of '58, school did not reopen in Little Rock. Rather than continue integration, they closed all of the high schools in Little Rock. They figured it was better for no education than a segregated education. And I particularly like the one photo of the sign they put in front of all the schools because they spelled government wrong. It's a good reminder to stay in school, especially if you want to be a politician. And then these last photos I have are from the 40th, the 65th, and the 66th, two of which I got to take. I've been here for 4 years now living in Arkansas. I've gotten to meet 7 of the living 8 members of the Little Rock 9. I've spent one-on-one time with them. I've even gotten to have some personal time with Minnie Jean and to hear their stories. And what I just want to leave you guys with today is a reminder that these individuals are the same ages that y'all are right now, 14, 17, and when they realized that they were changing the world, they didn't shy away from that responsibility. Ernest Green says we are all going to have a Central High moment. The question is, will you recognize it when you see it, and will you take action? Because if there's one thing that we should all take away from this story, is that silence in the face of oppression is consent. There were 1,500 students at Central in 1957, and only 20 of them were nice to the Little Rock 9. Consistently nice. They can tell you still to this day who those people were, what their names were. I've asked me to try to find some of them for them. 20 kids out of 1,500. So where does that leave everyone else? Either the attackers or the silent witnesses. And some of those people have come back to Little Rock and said, have expressed remorse that they didn't do something. You don't want to look back in your life 60 years from now and regret when you have an opportunity to be kind to someone, to make a change,
and the